All right, guys, so we're going to continue our flip game, and this is going to be section 4. Section 4 is a pretty big one, so this video might be kind of long. So if you have to stop it, just remember like what part you're at in the video and just come back to it later. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to insert an enemy that we'll actually be able to interact with. We're going to set up all the enemy's controls. We're going to make it so Flip can attack the enemy, and that takes a lot of events to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to make sure we're on our main layer. I'm going to insert a new sprite called a knight. So I'm just going to double click on my layout here. I'm going to make a sprite, and it's going to be called knight. Okay, insert, click on the screen to put it in. The knight is going to start off, he's not going to have just a default standing animation, so we're going to start with the walking animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click animation 1, I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to type in walking. Okay. And the walking is an animation, so I can't just load it with this folder here because that's only for single framed images. So I'm going to go down here into the animation frames window. I'm going to right click, import frames from a strip. Okay, and then we just have to go in and navigate to your folder. Now, if you've been doing this, it should go right back to the folder. I keep going into other folders in between videos, so I have to go and refind it. So just give me 1 second here. Intro to game design, flip images. All right, so this one should be called Night Walk, and it should be 8 frames. So I'm going to double click it. I'm going to type in 8 horizontal frames. I'm going to say replace the whole animation, and I'm going to click import, and then that should be in there and good to go. A couple of settings we need to change is we just need to set this one to loop, and I think the speed of 5 should be okay. We're going to make a couple of other animations. We're going to make a swinging animation and a stun animation. So in the animation here window in the upper right, I'm going to right click. I'm going to add another animation. Okay, and then this one is going to be called swinging. So rename it by right clicking it, swinging, and I'm going to right click and add another animation, and I'm going to rename it stun. Okay, and then I'm going to click on the swinging animation, and then I'm going to insert that. That one is also an animation, so I'm going to right click, import frames from a strip again, and I think it's called Night Sword. Let's see here, Night Sword, and it's 4 frames. So you're going to grab Night Sword, type in 4, replace whole animation, and you're good to go there. I don't think we have to mess with any of the settings on this one. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the stunned animation. The stunned animation is a single frame, so we can just click the load folder here in the upper left, and we can just find Night Stun. Now, if you do want to just load everything through the animation frames window, you can. You would just say 1 frame is all that you'd say, and it would do the exact same thing. Now, what you're going to notice when I made this one, if you go to your collision box thing down here, you can see it's got a really poor collision box. And like this one's got a nice square one, but this one does not. So what I like to do is when I'm done inserting animations, I like to make sure they're all consistent with consistent origin and consistent hitboxes. So I recommend you do this right away. So I got the collision box. I'm going to right click in the middle, and you can do this on any animation. It doesn't matter which one. Right click in the middle and then do set to bounding box. So you'll get that. And then you're going to right click in the middle again, and you're going to say apply to all animations. And that's going to do it to everything, every frame of every animation. So that was on this collision. So this little orange guy I've highlighted here, you have to have that selected to be able to do this. So if you didn't do that and you're confused, click on this first, then you get the image box to do that, or the hitbox. Then we're going to click on this little target here to do origin. The origin should already be in the middle, but I just like to do it to be safe. So I like to right click origin, quick assign middle, right click origin, and apply to all animations. And I know I'm good there. And then when you're done editing the origin, I recommend you click on the collision box or click on some other tool. Because what happens is when this is highlighted, if I click anywhere on the screen, my origin's going to move. And people accidentally move the origins all the time. It's very easy to do. So just be careful about that. All right, so I think that we've got the knight set up in terms of animations. So I can just have my knight down here. Now, obviously, this knight is just an empty sprite, so we have to give it behaviors and commands so that it knows what to do. So the knight is going to walk left and right just like Flip does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him platform behavior. So I'm going to go to behaviors, add a new behavior, and we're going to go platform. Okay, and then um, that should be the only behavior he needs, but there are some settings we need to change. So what you're going to notice here, I'm just going to go ahead and preview this. You're going to notice an issue with the knight right away, and that is when I move flip, the knight is moving with him. Okay, and the reason why, because if you remember, we didn't really have to tell Flip how to move. We just gave him the behavior and he moves, right? So the way that the platform behavior work is it just comes with preset default controls. So the knight also has that, and the computer doesn't know which character is the main character and which one isn't. So anything that has platform behavior, it's going to allow you to control it. So what we have to do is we have to change some settings so that we're not manually controlling this guy. So if you have the knight highlighted, go to the left into his properties, and one thing is the Knight's max speed of 330 is going to be way too fast, so we need to slow him down. He can't move on his own yet, but we'll see later on that we do want it slower, so we're going to lower that to 150. And then there's a box here called default controls, and you just want to uncheck that. So that means that now the arrow keys will not control the knight, and it will only control flip. So now if I do that, the knight basically is just going to sit there and just loop his walk animation because that's his default, and until we give him some other code, right? Okay, so we've got that all set up. We should be good to go there. Next thing, what we're going to do is we need to make some instance variables for our knight. Okay, now instance variables are basically variables that are just tied to that instance of an object. So the reason why instance variables are important is let's say the knights don't have health, but let's say they did, right? Because in a lot of video games, your enemies will have health. So if there was just a generic enemy health variable, if there's like 5 enemies on the screen, they would all be sharing that same global variable, and it wouldn't work because if I killed one enemy, then they would all get destroyed. So what an instance variable does is it makes it so each instance of that object has its own variable. So what I'm going to do is like if this knight had a health instance variable that was say 150, every knight I create is going to have a health instance variable of 150. And when I attack that knight and subtract from the instance variable, it's only going to subtract it from the one I'm attacking, not everything on the screen. Okay. So our knight is going to have some instance variables. He won't have health. He works a little bit differently, but we're going to have some variables to track basically what his actions are. And then whether he's stunned or not. Because the way our game is going to work is we're going to stun the knight and then be able to jump on his head to destroy him. So just highlight your knight, you're going to go to the left and you're going to find the word instance variables in blue. So it's right here. It's above the behaviors tab. So click on that. You're going to add a new instance variable. Okay. So our first variable is going to be called action. And what this action is going to be, it's basically we're going to use it in our code to tell if the knight's going left or right, or if they're stunned, or if they're attacking. Okay. When you make an instance variable, you have to choose a Boolean, a number, or a string. A Boolean is just a true false statement. A number is if you want to use a number, and a string is if you want to use words. We're going to refer to our action in terms of words, so we're going to use string. Okay, and we're going to set the initial value to left with a capital L. Okay, and you want to be consistent with it. If you use lowercase, then you got to use lowercase the whole way through. If you use uppercase, you use uppercase the whole way through. So in my example, I'm going to use uppercase. I believe in the presentation they use uppercase, so I'm just going to try to be consistent with that. Okay, so on the left here, you'll see now there's an instance variable called action and it equals left. Now this won't actually make the knight move left. Literally to the computer, it's just storing that value in for that variable. Okay, but in our code, on our event sheet later, we're going to add commands to that and then it's going to work. Okay, so now that I have left, I'm going to make another instance variable and we're going to make one that's called previous action. I'm going to abbreviate and just do PREV and then action. Now, when you're naming things in coding, never put empty spaces in. So if you have multiple words, just separate it with capital letters. Okay, so I have previous action. It's going to be a string, and I'm just going to leave the initial value blank. Okay, then we're going to make another instance variable, and then this one's going to be for stun time. So what's going to happen is, so I'm going to call this stun time. Um, the idea is you're going to shoot the knight with a coconut. We're going to set the stun time to a certain number, and then it's going to subtract out. And then basically we can use that to control when the knight is stunned and when he becomes unstunned. So we're just going to leave this at 0 to start, and that should be good to go. So I'm going to close that window. If you've done it correctly, you should be able to highlight your knight. And if you go to instance variables, you should see an action with a default value of left. Now you can go right here and you could edit this. So if you type that in wrong and want to change it, you can just type it in right there. We have a variable called previous action with nothing in it and a stun time with 0. So that's how you want this set up. Okay. Now what we're going to do is when the knight walks, we basically want to simulate that the knight is just walking back and forth. So sometimes we have to use some tricks in programming to do it, and a lot of times you use invisible objects. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make like a little edge marker that the knight's going to bump into and walk back and forth. So let's go ahead and make a new sprite. Okay, and we're just going to call it edge. I think, hold on, let me make sure I didn't call the other thing edge. Let me cancel this out. I just want to make sure oh yeah, our other one is called boundary. Okay. Just don't call it the same thing as like this wall out here. So we called that boundary. So the night marker we're going to call edge, or you could call it night marker. Um, the presentation keeps changing. It used to be called night marker, so that's what I'm used to, but the new presentation calls it edge. So I'm going to try to be consistent with that. So I'm going to insert an edge and I'm going to click on the screen, and it's going to be an invisible object, so it doesn't need to look special. But we do want to get it to the right size. So I'm just going to click this paint bucket here. On the left side, we're just going to fill it in. We're going to click this color swatch up here. And we're just going to do yellow. You can do whatever color you want. Just yellow is what they do in the presentation, so that's what I'm going to do. And then we need to resize it. So up here in the upper right, there's a resize button. And we're just going to make it 25 by 25 pixels. Okay. When you're resizing objects, it's important that you always resize it here. If you have like a consistent size that you want it to be, you can resize out here. Like I could grab and I could drag this and resize. But you want to avoid doing that just because it will distort the pixels and things like that. Now, for this invisible object, it really doesn't matter. But if you were, say, resizing Flip, and he's always going to be that size, you wouldn't want to do it out here. You'd want to do it within there, because when you do it out here, it stretches the pixels. If you do it in there, it's going to proportionally try to scale it down, and it's going to look cleaner. All right, so I've got this edge here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to hold Control, and we're going to click and drag and make another edge, and basically we're going to make these two edges to kind of block him in. So you want one edge on either side of the knight. Okay, if you don't want to hold Control and copy it, you can grab your edge here on the right and you could just drag it on. That would work too. Okay, so we've got the edge. Now the next thing we want to do is, you can see when I run the game that we see those yellow blocks there and we don't want to see them. So what we can do is, on the edge, if I go to the properties here on the left side, there is something called initially visible right here. And if you uncheck that, that basically means it's going to be invisible at start. So now if I run it, you'll see that they're gone. Okay, but they're still there. They physically exist. They're just invisible. And something you can do to test that is, if I click this and I run it in debug, um, you'll see here on the left side, I can click on edge here and it's showing that two of them exist. And I can click and I'll highlight it. So it's right there. It exists. It's just invisible. Okay. All right. So we've got the edges on there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some events now. So go ahead and double click on your ES game. And you can see we're starting to get quite a few events. And we kind of want to keep this a little bit cleaner. So we're going to start to make groups. So to make a group, you're going to right click down here in the empty space and we're going to add a group. Okay. And we're going to make a group that's called Flip Movement. We're going to make another group that's called Night Actions. Okay. And what's going to happen is we're going to be able to sort the code so that it will be a lot easier to read. So we're going to go ahead and do Night Actions. Creating groups and organizing your code is absolutely essential. If you turn in games without groups and without organized code, you do lose points on that. Okay. Now I think I talked about this in a previous video, but we're going to be moving some events, right? So what we want to do is we want to move anything that has to do with flip movement into this flip movement group. So it's literally going to be everything we have so far except this on start of layout. So let's say I was just moving one event. So if I took this flip on moved, you want to grab it by where this green arrow is on the left side, or you'd grab it but on the far left here where the green arrow would be. Okay, you don't want to grab the on move, you don't want to grab the walk, you're going to pull that specific condition or action out. You want to grab the whole event, so you grab it by the left side. So what you do is you grab this and you pull it down just underneath the flip movement group, like that. Now I'm going to undo that because there's a way to do it all at once that I want to show you. Another thing is don't get confused by this. So this event here has sub events with it. As long as I click the main event, the sub events will come with it. Something else you can do is anytime you see this black arrow, that means you can minimize the event. So right here, this looks like a blank event, but it's just because it's minimized. If I click on the black arrow, it'll open up and I can see my sub events again. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this top event. And what you could do is if you hold control, you can grab multiple events at a time. Okay. And then I let go of control. I can see that they're all highlighted. I can grab any of these by the green arrow and pull it under to the flip movement. Okay. And now what should happen is I can minimize the flip movement group and you can see it's all tucked in there really nice. So then when I'm not working on flip movement, I just keep that closed and I'm not overwhelmed by all the code. Okay. So now the reason why that's important is because now we're going to start making some night actions in this night actions group. So what you're going to do, and in the presentation, it's kind of confusing because they throw out the word sub event a lot. But what they're telling you to do is you're not actually making sub events. They're telling you to make a sub event to the group. So they tell you to right click on the group name and then do add sub event into the group. But with Construct 3, um, they just have this little button right here where I can just add the event to the group. So we're going to do that. So we're going to put an event in the group. And basically, we want to tell it what to do with the action variable that we made. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event to night actions and I'm going to do the night. And what I want to do is I want to compare his instance variable. So basically, I'm going to say if his action variable equals left, I'm going to tell him to actually walk left. So what we're going to do is night, and I'm going to type in compare instance variable, and it pops up right here. Okay. So you're doing night compare instance variable. The word action is here, and you can see when I click on this, I get to see all of his instance variables. So I'm going to say action. I'm going to leave this as equal to, and then here we need to type in the word left in quotation marks, and it's got to be capital L just like how you typed it. If this word isn't identical to how you wrote it initially, it's not going to work. So you just need to make sure that they match up. So the event looks like this. It says night action equals left. Then when the night's action equals left, I'm going to add an action here, and I'm going to do night, and I'm going to do simulate control. So this is how we simulate movement when we don't have default controls on. So I'm going to simulate control. I'm going to simulate that he's moving left. Okay. And then we also want to set the night's animation. So I'm going to add another action for night. And I'm going to do animation. Whoops. I'm going to just type in animation and I can do set animation. When you're doing an animation, you want to delete the quotation marks and just type a quotation mark and it will pop up with your options. We're going to set the animation to walking. Okay. So anytime you do get the option to click on it, you want to do it because then you know the spelling's correct. When we're doing the action instance variable, we don't get that option. So we have to type it in manually. And then just like flip, when the knight's walking left, we have to mirror him so his body flips around, right? So I'm going to add a third action to this, and I'm going to do knight, and I'm going to do set mirrored. Okay, like that. So now if I go onto the right here and I highlight my knight, we can look at the properties. We can see his action is going to start off as left with a capital L. And now this code says if his action equals left with a capital L, he's going to walk left, he's going to animate walking, and he's going to mirror. So if I run my game really quick, the knight is just going to walk left. I'll make this bigger. He's just going to keep walking left forever because we haven't told him and he got stopped by solid there. But and these little invisible boxes, they don't do anything because they're not solid. And it's a common misconception that people think they should be solid, but that's really bad. Because imagine this invisible block here solid, it's going to block flip out and it's going to be very confusing to the player. So do not make those edges solid. We're going to take care of that through code. Okay. And we're getting there. Now what we want to do is we want to do this exact same code, except we want to do it for him facing right. Now I could go and retype the code out, but it's going to be very similar to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click here and highlight the whole event. I can right click and copy. I can right click it again and I can paste. And now I've got another set. The other option you could do is if you highlight it, you can just hold control and you can just drag another one underneath, and that works too. So that's how you'd copy and paste the event. So go ahead and try to copy and paste it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change this action to right with a capital R. Oops. Just like that. And then we're going to simulate. So I can just double click the simulate left and change it to right. And then animation walking is good. And then we're going to change the mirrored to not mirrored. So essentially we just reverse the event. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple more actions. We have that the knight could be stunned and that the knight could be swinging. So I'm just going to add another event to the knight action group. I'm going to do knight compare instance variable. I'm going to say action equals stun with a capital S like that. And then when his action is stun, we're going to change his animation to stun. So we're going to do an action for the knight. We're going to do animation. And we're going to type a quotation mark and we're going to grab the stunned animation. Just like that. And then we're going to add another knight action or another event to the knight actions group. And it's going to be knight compare instance variable again. And it's going to be action is equal to swing. So this is going to be when he attacks. Now, this event, we're going to leave it blank for now. It's not really ready to get the rest of it in yet, but later on, I think it's in the next section. It won't even be in this video. We're going to add on to this. So don't worry about that part right now, but we want that there just for placement. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the collision events for when the knight hits the edge, and we're actually going to make him walk left and right. So whereas you saw my game right now, he just walks left and he just goes through that edge marker, we're actually going to make it so that when he hits it, he's going to switch his action and do the opposite of what he was previously doing. So we're going to add another event to the knight action group, and we're going to say knight, and we're going to do on collision with another object, and we're going to say when the knight collides with the edge. Okay. Now we can't just say when he collides with the edge to like set his action to something. We have to set up sub events because we need to know what action he's in when he collides with it, right? So when he collides with it, he's either going to be going left or right, basically. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up the opposite. So we need to make a sub event on this because there's two situations, right? So I'm going to right click on the green arrow. We're going to add a sub event. And we're going to test if the knight is already moving left. So we're going to do knight compare instance variable again. So compare instance variable, and we want to know if his action is equal to left when he collides with it. So just like that. So now this says if he collides with it and his action is left, then what we want to do is we want to set his action to right. So it's basically going to reverse him. So we add an action for the knight, and what we can do is we can type in set value because we're going to set the value of his instance variable, and we're going to set action to right with a capital R. Okay. So the way that this reads, right? So the knight's default action here starts as left. So this is going to trigger on start of layout. Okay. He's going to walk left, and then he's going to collide with this edge while his action equals left, and then it's going to set his action to right. So then up here, we said if action equals right, he's going to simulate right. So that's what's going to get him moving the other direction. Now the issue is he's going to walk right and then just walk through the edge marker again. So you would think that we could just add another sub event that says if his action is right, set action to left. But we're going to do something a little bit safer. Basically, if his action is left, he's going to move right. And then we could say if his action is anything else, we just want him to move left. And that's a little bit safer because when you're shooting the knight and he's going in between stun and things like that, it is possible that he could be colliding with it with an action that isn't left or right, and then he gets stuck forever. So to avoid that, we're going to take this action equals left, and I'm going to right click it here on the outside, and we're going to do something called add else. So basically what this else means is if it's anything else. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set his action to left. So I could just copy this down, and then I could just change this from right to left with a capital L inside quotation marks. Okay, like that. All right. So now basically how this event reads is if he collides with the edge, if his action is left, we're going to set his action to right. else, which means otherwise. So if his action is anything except left, he will set his action to left. And that's just a little bit safer to make sure. So if I run it really quick, so his action is left, he collides, switches to right, collides, and then switches to left. And so that simulates that he's walking back and forth. And notice that it's not solid. Like Flip can walk through it and everything, which is what we want. So to the player who doesn't know how the game is programmed, it just looks like the knight is programmed to walk left and right. They would have no idea that there's actually an invisible object sitting there. Okay. So sometimes that's the illusion we create with programming. Okay. Um, what I'm going to do is we are going to now add the coconut so that Flip can shoot. So I'm going to go into here. I'm going to double click and make a sprite. I'm going to call it coconut. And I'm going to click to add. And the coconut can just have animation 1. It doesn't need anything else. We're going to import it as a frame. So I'm going to right click, import frames from a strip. And here's the coconut here, and it's got 6 frames. So I'm going to click import, and we've got the 6 frames. The coconut should loop down here in the lower right, and I think the speed is 8 on the coconut. Nope, the speed is 12 actually. 12. So speed of 12 and loop on. Okay. The coconut, it's very important you put it underneath the layout. The reason why is because it's going to be a bullet that like flies across the screen. And if you put this coconut like here on the left, it's going to fly across and enter your screen right away. So just keep it underneath right there. That should be just fine. Then on Flip, we're going to add a shooting animation to him. So I'm going to right click hit. So I double clicked Flip. I'm going to right click on his animation window. We're going to rename this and we're going to call it shoot. Okay. And his shoot is a single frame. So I'm just going to load the image. I'm going to find Flip shoot. Now on the shoot animation, anytime you add a new animation, if you did collision box stuff earlier, you're going to have to fix that again. So you can see his collision box is really messed up here. So I could right click and just do set to bounding box, or you could click on another animation like its default, and you could just right click it and apply it to all animations, and then it would fix it. So either way, but go ahead and fix the collision box. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the target here for the origin. And the origin is like the source of where the character is originated, but we can create other image points. And an image point basically is just another spot on the character we can reference, right? So if I right click on the word origin, I can add a new image point, and it's going to be called image point 1. And if that's highlighted, I can click where I want it, and I want it right on the tip of the gun. And so the reason why we're going to make this image point 1 is so that when he spawns the coconut, if I didn't make this image point 1, the coconut would basically be coming out of his neck. It's going to come out of the origin. But by making an image point 1, we can say we want the coconut to come out of where that edge of the gun is. So that's the way we're going to do that. Okay. All right. So I've got that. The coconut, we have to add a behavior to it. So I'm going to click on that. We're going to give it a behavior, and it's going to be called bullet. So you can just type it in if you don't want to look for it. Bullet behavior basically is just programmed to make it fly in a straight direction. If you did Asteroid Destroyer, you know how that works already. Um, so then on the left side here, we're going to change the speed to 1000 in the properties for the coconut. We're going to do this set angle here. We need to turn that off. So the reason why, set angle means that it's going to change the angle of motion. That's the direction it's actually flying to match the physical angle of the object. So if the object is rotated, it's going to fly in that same direction. We want to turn that off because we want to basically code and tell it what direction to move in while ignoring the actual angle of the object. Okay. And then we're just going to quick set up some events so Flip can shoot. So I'm going to go into my ES game. And what we're going to do is, so I'm going to minimize this night actions group so I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not going to do stuff with that right now. We're going to make another group. So I'm going to add a group, and it's going to be called Flip Combat and Collisions. Oops, one word, right? No spaces. Combat. Okay, we're going to call it Flip Combat and Collisions like that. I'm going to make a new event for it. And we're going to do a keyboard event, and we're going to do on key pressed. And I'm going to click here and then press spacebar. So we're going to make it so the spacebar shoots. So we got keyboard on space pressed. When we're going to add an action, and it's going to be um, flip, and we're going to tell flip to spawn another object. So we have keyboard on space press, the action right here, we did flip, spawn another object. So flip is going to spawn a coconut. We're going to actually tell him to spawn it on layer 1. So if you look on the right in your layers window, the layers are numbered. So layer 1 is the main layer. So we want to spawn it on the main. If we spawn the coconut on the background layer, it could go behind the background, which we don't want. And then we're going to do image point 1. That's that image point we just put on the gun. Okay. So when you press space, he's going to spawn a coconut. The other thing we have to do is we have to tell flip to play the shoot animation. So I'm going to add an action for flip, set animation, and I'm going to type a quotation mark, and we're going to do the shoot animation. Now, I actually have these in the wrong order. The shoot animation has to go on top, so you can just drag that right above. The reason why is because he has to enter shoot animation first and then spawn the coconut, because the shoot animation is what has image point 1 on it. If it was the other way, it would spawn the coconut from the origin because he hasn't entered shoot animation yet. And then he would go to shoot animation, it would look funny. So you want it in this order: set animation to shoot, spawn coconut. So if I run it really quick, you can see I press space to shoot and the coconut pops out of the gun. Now the other issue is that the coconut's always flying to the right. So the default angle of motion for an object is 0 degrees, which goes to the right. So when I'm facing left, we want it to be 180 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. So what you want to do is you want to make a sub event to the on space pressed. So I'm going to right click on the green arrow. I'm going to add a sub event. And then we want to check if flip is mirrored or not. So we're going to do flip is mirrored. Okay, so if flip is mirrored, that means he's facing to the left. So we'll add an action for the coconut, and we can set the angle of motion. And you don't want to get confused between set angle and angle of motion. So angle of motion is actually the direction that the bullet flies. The angle is just like the rotated angle of the object. So like if it were just sitting still, the angle is just what rotation it's at, but the angle of motion is the direction it's flying. Okay, so we want angle of motion. We want to do 180. Okay, and if you're not sure why we're putting 180 for this, in Google Classroom or in the digital classroom, there should be a chart that I've posted of an image that shows like a circle and it shows all the degree angles. Okay, so now when I press space, if flip is mirrored, it'll set angle of motion to 180. So if I run it like this, you see if I'm left, it's 180, and if I'm right, it's normal. Okay, so now that works. Now in the presentation, there is a mistake here. They do not put this as a sub event, and that actually makes it work incorrectly. So I'll show you really quick. If that's not a sub event, watch what happens. So if I shoot it to the right and I left, it'll boomerang back. Because since it's not a sub event, it's just saying anytime flip is mirrored, it's going to set any bullet's angle to 180. Whereas if this is a sub event, the event will only trigger the moment I press space. So that's why sub-eventing is important. So now that it's sub-evented, you can see I can turn and it's just going to stay how it is, because it's only the moment I press space, if I mirrored, it'll flip. So make sure that this is a sub-event to the on space press. If you're doing the video in combination with the presentation does have it wrong. So I want to make sure I'm clear about that. Okay, which is part of the reason I'm recording the whole game as videos. That way I know that there's like everything's correct. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do, we did all that. We did all that. So now we're going to make, so I'm just going to minimize the flip combat group. And now we're going to make another group for coconut collisions. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we want to make it so that the coconut is destroyed off screen. So we're going to add an event to the coconut group, and we're going to say coconut. And we're going to test if it is on screen. So the command is on. If you just type is on, you'll see this is on screen. And then what we want to do is we want to right click it and invert it. So now this says coconut is not on screen. So anytime the coconut is not on screen, we want to add action and we want to do coconut destroy. Okay. Now, some of you may have noticed that there's a behavior that kind of does something similar. If I just click, you don't have to do this, I'm just going to show you. But if you click on behaviors for the coconut, there is one that's called destroy outside of layout. The reason why putting the code in is better than this, because if I go to my level, our levels are really big and they scroll, right? So that destroy outside of layout means the coconut has to physically leave the layout to get destroyed. So if Flip is right here and he shoots and the coconut's here and it's off screen, but it's still on the layout, it'll still exist. The code that I've done here, this just says if it's not on screen. So basically this means if the player can't see it, it gets destroyed. That's a little bit different than being outside the layout. So if Flip is standing over here, the moment the coconut hits this edge where I can no longer see it, that's when it gets destroyed. So they are slightly different. Okay. But it is important we do this. Otherwise, if you don't destroy the coconut off screen or outside of layout, every coconut you shoot is going to infinitely exist and just be flying off screen forever and ever and ever. And then that's going to cause lag and frame rate issues and things like that. So you want to be clean. You want to destroy things when they don't need to be there, right? So we've got that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say when the coconut collides with the platform, we want to destroy it. So the coconut doesn't go through the platform. So I'm going to add an event to the coconut group again. Coconut on collision with the platform. And then we're going to do coconut destroy. I have one right here, so I'm just going to copy that down. So that's pretty basic. And then we're going to set up another event. So add another event to coconut collision group. And we're going to do coconut on collision with another object. And then we're going to choose the knight. And we're going to set up some stuff to get the knight stunned. Okay. All right. So then what we're going to do is the coconut on collision with knight, we're going to test first to see if the knight is already stunned or if he's not stunned. So I'm going to add a sub event by clicking on the green arrow. I'm going to add sub event and we're going to test if the knight is stunned. So we have to do knight and we have to compare his instance variable and action equal to, and then here we're going to do stun with a capital S just like that. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to right click this and we're going to add an else on it. So basically, these are our two situations. The coconut hits the knight is either stunned or he's in any other action. Okay. When the knight is stunned, we're going to add an action to there and we're going to do coconut destroy. And then we're going to do another action for the action equals stun. So right here where my cursor is, we're going to do knight. We're going to set the value yep, we're going to set the value of an instance variable, and we're going to click this up here, and we're going to change it to stun time. And we're going to set his stun time to 3. So basically, if he's already stunned, we're just going to reset the stun time back to 3. Now this else is going to have the same too, so I can just control and copy these down. Okay. So if his action is not stunned, we still want to destroy the coconut. We still want to set a stun time to 3, but now we're going to add 2 other actions to this. So what we need to do is we're going to add an action for the knight. We're going to set the value of one of his instance variables. And you should have created an instance variable called previous action. Okay. Basically, what we're going to do is, so what's going to happen is we're going to shoot the knight. And then what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what his action is already. So he might be left, he might be moving right. We're going to store that in as the previous action variable. So what we're going to do for the value here is we're actually not going to have quotation marks, and we're going to type in knight. And you want to double click on the choice it gives you. You want to do a period, so dot, and then action. Okay, so knight dot action refers to the action that the knight currently has. So we shoot the knight, it takes his current action, so let's say his action is right, it stores that in his previous action. So now his previous action becomes right. Okay, then after that, then we set his action to stun so that he gets stunned. So we do knight set value of action to stun. So what we're going to do is we're just going to type in stun like that inside the quotation marks. Okay. Perfect. So we're almost done. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to minimize this group. We're going to go back into the night action group. Okay. And then we have this event number 15 here, night action equals stun. Yours could be a different number, but if you've done it just like me, it should be number 15. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to make it so that when the knight is unstunned, that he can go back to normal. So let's add a sub event to number 15. Okay. And then we want to compare if the knight's stun time is greater than 0. Okay. Or no, we want to say if the knight's stun time equals 0, my bad. So we want to do knight and we want to do compare instance variable. We want to know if his stun time is equal to 0. So basically if his stun time is 0, that means he gets unstunned. Okay. So then what we do is we add an action for the knight. We're going to set value again and we're going to change his action to get rid of the quotation marks, and we're going to type in knight dot previous action. And you want to double click on the ones it gives you so that you type that in correctly. Okay. Okay, we just have a couple more events, and then I'll kind of explain this because I know it's kind of confusing, right? Um, just want to double check I've got everything here. Yes, I think I do got it all. Okay, so the last thing is we're just going to go to the bottom of the night actions group. So I'm going to add an event to night actions here at the bottom. And basically we want to make an event that will subtract the stun time. So we're going to do night compare instance variable again. We're going to say if his action is greater than, not his action, sorry. We want his stun time. So change this to stun time. If his stun time is greater than 0, okay, we're going to add an action, night, subtract from, and we're going to subtract 1 from stun time. Now, if we leave it like this, it's just going to subtract this like mega fast. It's going to do it as fast as possible. So we have to add another condition onto this so that it subtracts every 1 second, not just constantly. So I'm going to right click here like I'm doing a sub event. I'm going to add another condition. So this right here. And then I'm going to do system, and that's called every X seconds. I'm going to change it to 1 second or leave it there and click done. So now the way this works, I'll just go through it really quick and then we'll be done with the video. So if we go into coconut collisions, right? The coconut hits the knight. Let's say his action is right. He's walking right, okay? So coconut hits him. The action is right. So this will trigger. It destroys the coconut, sets his stun time to 3. It sets previous action to knight.action, which is his current action. So he was moving right. So now previous action becomes right. Then it changes his action to stun. So then it goes up here. It says, okay, action is stunned. So his animation goes to stunned. Okay. Now his stun time got set to 3. So this is triggering. So his stun time is greater than 0. So every 1 second it subtracts. So it's going to subtract down until it hits 0. Then stun time hits 0, which triggers this. And then it changes his action to his previous action. At the bottom, we stored in right, so he's going to start walking right again. So basically, he will resume what he does when he becomes unstunned. All right, thanks for listening, guys. I know that was a long video, but that should be it for section 4.